Good evening. I will now call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is to adopt tonight's agenda for tonight's meeting. I'd like to make a correction to the agenda. We're going to do the public hearing for the swimming pool first, and then we will do the West Creek Village residential development. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as adopted?
So moved.
Second?
Yeah, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Our next order of business is to adopt the minutes from our March 4th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We will now move on to our discussion items. Our first item tonight is for discussion is to consider a pool variance for 6580 Aster Trail. This item does include a public hearing. I will now turn it over to Associate Planner Travis Beerley for our staff presentation, and then I will open the public hearing for those in the chambers this evening that wish to speak on the request.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I apologize about the technical difficulty we're having with the monitors in front of you tonight, but we'll have everything up on the side screens for the presentation. Tonight we are taking a second look at a request for variance at 6580 Aster Trail. We did have a public hearing a month ago on this, but there's been new information. This request has been modified to go from the 75 or the 25-foot encroachment out to a 28-foot encroachment from the 100-foot shoreland setback. The application we did receive in January and was ruled complete January 24th of this year. There was a 60-day rule which we elected to extend with the applicant, which will extend up to May 24th for the City Council to make a final decision on it. We did redo the public notice and mailed it to all the residents within 350 feet, as well as getting it published in the Waconia Patriot. Like I said, we conducted a public hearing on February 18th. And then staff has discussed this application as well as the plans with the DNR, with Carver County, and with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. There's new information that was discovered tonight after conversations from the public hearing, post the Planning Commission meeting with the applicant, and those are considered significant enough to bring back for potential reconsideration of the Planning Commission's recommendation. As a reminder, the applicant is looking to install a pool which will cross over the 100-foot shoreline setback, and when we're looking at that, we're looking at a total encroachment of about 28 feet. When we consider a variance, the biggest thing for us is look at the practical difficulties question. The first part of practical difficulties is establishing if this is a reasonable request. It's staff's opinion that this is a reasonable request for a pool to be permitted as an accessory use to a single-family home. The next thing that we look at is the uniqueness of the property. The uniqueness of the property comes down to is if there's a plight of the owner. So is there something that the way the property is designed, laid out, that prohibits from being able to place an item, in this case a pool, legally on the property within our current zoning regulations. The next factor that's considered in practical difficulties is the essential character of the property. If the pool is constructed, would it have an effect on the neighborhood itself or the area? Would it cause any type of adverse impacts? Staff would agree that a pool does not create adverse impacts. So when we start talking about the uniqueness, we're going to talk about two main things tonight which come up as new information. One is the lot shape. As a reminder, it is an irregular lot that was part of a minor subdivision back in 2014. The intent of the subdivision was to create one lot for a single-family home. Unfortunately, that home was built fairly close to the 100-foot setback. On the screen, you can see a vertical line going through the middle of the image, the dark dash line. That is where the 100-foot setback is. With that being said, staff took a look at the front yard to see if that was a reasonable location for a pool, and it's not because of space and because you just don't see pools in people's front yards on single-family properties. On the south side of the home, there's steep slopes that make the pool impractical to put in. You would need significant retaining walls, and it would cause issues with stormwater management and controls. Then we look at the west part where the applicant is proposing to put the pool within inside that 100-foot setback, or at least the majority of it. That area is more flat and we require shorter retaining walls, and stormwater can still be managed through vegetation and other means. That's more a practical application to not cause any troubles. On the north side of the property, and this is where the new information comes, when staff had looked at this, there is a consideration of being able to put a pool on the north side of the home. Not necessarily a large pool, but any pool in general, could it fit? And the answer that staff had a month ago was yes, it could fit. New information has been presented by the landscaper, who we're going to consider to be an expert in how properties work, described to us and showed us as staff that any type of obstruction that goes there is going to cause drain water or stormwater issues, either going to the property line and potentially across it, which wouldn't meet stormwater controls as required by the state, or the water would be forced towards the home, causing significant mitigation that would need to take place. Either way, it would go in you would have that stormwater issue, and then you'd have a large retaining wall, which would likely be over 4 feet. Once a retaining wall is designed to be over 4 feet, building code requires that it's an engineered retaining wall, which adds a significant cost and another challenge towards construction. So that's the new information that comes into play on this. Staff did consider the different areas and what it would mean when looking at the 4 different locations, and the only place that could reasonably make sense to put a pool would be within the shoreland, which would require a setback. And just a reminder, as part of the variance request application, there's 2 properties cited. The first one was 6642 Aster Trail, which was a variance in 2023. That was for the replacement of a home that needed a variance because of stormwater controls. It was on a similar footprint. It was outside the 100-foot, and there was an easement that the DNR required. The second thing that we looked at real quick was 7321 Tamarack Trail, which was also part of the variance request application. This variance request was for additional hardcover to be on the property and was done in 2024. The homeowner had purchased the property prior to a change in our zoning code with plans to have a pool put in, and they went through a pretty arduous process with the DNR and with landscape design for stormwater controls on the property. With that, the city council approved both variances there. When we do look at the practical difficulties of this particular application or any application, we have to look at the state statute, and we have to know that variances may be granted when an applicant for a variance establishes our practical difficulties in complying with the zoning ordinance. Just to reiterate what that means is it means that an ability to comply with the zoning code, or in this case to install a pool within inside the current language of our zoning code, would cause an undue hardship, something that would be extreme and difficult to actually achieve, that you wouldn't see as reasonably done. And then our zoning code is specific in stating that the commission will not recommend and the council will not grant a variance unless they find the following of facts. 1, strict enforcement or interpretation that would result in practical difficulties or undue hardship inconsistent with the intent of the city code. Meaning, if the planning commission would see it as unreasonable to put a pool in another location, that it could legally be because of external difficulties. And that leads to the next part, where it's exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that generally wouldn't apply to other properties. In this case, the shape of the property as well as the placement of the home in relation to the setback has been looked at by the city council in the past. That is a factor to consider, and that was not considered a plight of the property owner. So we would be looking at primarily the stormwater management and the topography of the site as far as the placement of a pool. The other thing is that we wouldn't want the granting of a variance to adversely affect the public health, welfare, safety, and would be not detrimental, injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood. This also includes any controls or damages that a pool could potentially cause to our lake system or to any type of erosion within inside that 100-foot setback. The last thing we want to look at is granting a variance will not allow a use which is otherwise not permitted in the zoning code in question. What that is basically saying, is a pool allowed to be on this property? The answer is yes. So that's probably the easiest question to answer of the 4 criteria that the Planning Commission should consider when providing a recommendation. As far as the discussion, we want to take a direct look at, should a variance be recommended for approval? The Planning Commission should ask themselves the following questions, and I apologize, it's a little small on the screens, but is a pool a reasonable use for a single-family property? Would the installation of a pool change the essential character of the neighborhood? Does the zoning code create practical difficulties in the plight of the landowner? Are there exceptional or extraordinary circumstances, and would any adverse effects be caused by granting this variance? That's the first group of questions that should be answered by the Planning Commission. And then if the Planning Commission is leaning towards approval, should the allowable setback be extended or kept at its place? This would only be if the Planning Commission wanted to recommend any type of flexibility, if it is a recommendation for approval. And are there any reasonable conditions that the Planning Commission would want if there is a recommendation for approval? This could be anything from vegetation to anything for protections based on any comments that the Planning Commission has. With that being said, after the discussion, staff would request that the Planning Commission provide a reconsideration of the recommendation of denial, which we provided the last time we visited this, and determine whether the denial should stand, whether an approval should be recommended, or whether an approval with specific conditions should be recommended to the City Council. For that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Travis. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Yeah, please.
State your name and.
Yeah, John Stockman, and I'm here with my wife, Jane Stockman. So thank you for hearing our considerations again and the opportunity to meet with you guys again. After our last meeting, we worked with Travis and Brian to really understand what we could do and what would work. And I think that's where the information came out that, our pool expert said, a pool of any size on the north side of the house is not feasible due to the, stormwater mitigation issue. But before we get into that specifically, I want to take a step back and talk about kind of why the 3 reasons we think a variance is deserved. So 1, we think that we obviously meet the variance criteria as Travis laid out, that we have a reasonable use, a pool is a reasonable thing to use. We won't change the essential characteristic of the neighborhood. There's a number of pools, including next door to us. And that there is a plight to the ownership and a hardship that results in a hardship. And we'll talk about that in a second. The second thing is we're not setting a new precedent with this pool in the city of Victoria. There are a number of pools within the 100-foot setback. Whether this was in previous coding or not, there's pools within 60 feet of the shoreline within the city of Victoria. So we're not setting a new precedent that doesn't exist. And third, we believe that we're following the intent of the code to protect the lakeshore with this pool, because recreation would be focused at the pool instead of down at the lakeshore where we're disrupting the wildlife and the native vegetation. So we're going to dive into each of these 3 really quickly. Travis, if you wouldn't mind forwarding to the next slide. In terms of our qualification to meet a variance, Travis laid it out pretty clearly. We have to show that it's a reasonable use, which they agreed that it is, and we've talked about that before. The project will not affect the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, which we've all agreed that a pool would not be out of the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. And finally, that we face a practical difficulty or a plight resulting in a hardship. That's where we provided additional information about the characteristics of our lot. And they've agreed that due to the uniqueness of our lot, that we have a hardship in placing a pool anywhere that meets the current code and does not encroach on the 100-foot. They've agreed that there's not a place that we could realistically place a pool without ruining our stormwater mitigation, without encroaching on the 100-foot part of the lot. Our pool builder, who's built over 100 pools in the city of Victoria, said in his expert opinion, a pool of any size on the north side of the home will result in significant stormwater control issues and therefore is not a feasible location to place a pool. The report should have been included in your packet that you guys got. It's up there as well. But he just lays out in that report that, there's a significant drop, 7.5-foot drop, and there's currently a swell or a swale to maintain the current drainage. To place a pool there, we have to do a significant amount of grading. Basically the east and north side would have to be raised or lowered, and the south and west side would have to be raised, and this would not accommodate any drainage or runoff water on site, and drainage would have to basically be redirected to the neighboring property. And, Nick Glanis from Atlantis Pools is here tonight if you have questions specifically about, that report. In our location that we propose on the west side, there was no disruption to drainage and stormwater controls, as Travis just said. In addition, and while these are not as significant of issues as the stormwater control issues, they are considerations. And we've talked about this before. If we wanted to build a pool on the north side of the property, a significant amount of mature trees would need to be removed. And we think this is not keeping the essential characteristic of the neighborhood. There's a good privacy between the homes, pretty common in this neighborhood, and that wouldn't continue to do that. Also, this large engineered retaining wall would need to be built. And to do that, substantial grading work would have to go on beyond the setback to get this wall in place, because the wall would have to extend beyond the 100-foot setback if we were going to build on the north side. And obviously, this would affect and disrupt roots and sedimentary soils and everything within that setback area. This would not need to be done if we place it where we are proposing to place it, on the west side of the house. So again, due to the new information that our pool installer has told us, where a pool of any size would result in significant stormwater control issues, we believe that we meet the qualification for a variance and that we have a hardship with the ability to place a pool anywhere on our lot that does not encroach on the 100-foot setback. And just quickly, I know Travis said a 28-foot setback. The edge of the pool currently, as laid out in that diagram, is at 24 feet into the setback, or 76 feet away from the shoreline. We need to have an 18-inch coping edge, we learned. We don't need, I think we have 4 feet in the drawing, that's why it was 28 feet total, but we only need 18 inches and we're fine with that. Like the minimum amount of coping edge, we're good with that. So 26 foot, including the coping edge, 24 foot to water's edge, or pool's edge, over the setback. So 74 or 76 feet from lakeshore. Second reason, if we go down to the next slide, is again, we're not setting a new precedent. These are a couple of homes that, are in the area. Half of the homes that are currently on Lake Virginia with a pool have those pools within 100 feet or within the setback. They're not 100 feet distance from the lakeshore. They also have examples of pools within the city of Victoria that are less than 60 feet away from the lakeshore. Obviously, we're not asking to do that. So I just want to reiterate that, we are not setting a new precedent, something that doesn't exist within the city. While codes may have changed since these pools were built, given the infeasibility that we just talked about of locating a pool elsewhere on our property, it seems reasonable for us to have the ability to build a pool that is in a similar location to numerous pools within the city. And then finally, just the idea of meeting the intent of the setback rules. We believe that following the intent of the setback rules is what we're doing with our proposed location. The goal of setback is to preserve vegetation, marine life, and the natural shoreline. If our variance is granted, we've agreed to do runoff mitigation, use 100% permeable pavers, and replant that native vegetation on the hillside going down to the shoreline, as well as do anything else that's asked of us to preserve the shoreline. As lifelong lake owners, which we are, we agree with the intent of protecting the lakeshore. If the variance is not granted, however, obviously we're going to focus our recreation down at the lakeshore side. Kids will be down there matting down native vegetation, disrupting wildlife, and doing activities that we could be doing in a pool. This is likely more detrimental to the pool, to the native vegetation and the lakeshore than any potential runoff that could happen from the pool that we're going to do our best to mitigate. So again, we feel like the location of our pool actually helps maintain the natural habitat of that shoreline. So in summary, we think we meet the requirements for a variance, including that our unique lot creates a hardship due to the stormwater control issues, that we can't place a pool anywhere but the west side. We are not setting a new precedent in the city like we talked about, and that adding a pool better meets the intent of the setback rule for protecting our shoreline than having our family focus our recreation down on the waterfront, disturbing that vegetation. When we purchased this home a year ago, we were very excited about making Victoria a lifelong home and making this home our lifelong home. The pool was part of that dream. And, we hope you guys consider that. Obviously, we are trying to do our best to work with the city, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that we can, be able to meet our dreams, but also do it in a way that mitigates any of the risks that we're worried about. So thank you for hearing our considerations. Any questions?
Thank you.
Only question I have is, what is the proposed size of the pool? The overall
So
size?
standard pool, generally Minnesota is 20 by 40. We've made that smaller to be able to minimize the setback. So we're going 18 feet wide by 38 feet is the current plan. 36 feet,
18 by 30, thank you.
18 by 36.
Is it not possible to put a pool of any size on the western part of your property?
The western side is what we are proposing.
I understand, but is it not possible to put a smaller pool on that without encroaching?
It's not possible without encroaching because we have to be 10 feet away from the home. And that's basically where that line is. And so any size pool would basically have to encroach because the wall of our house, as you can see here, is about 10 feet from that setback. You didn't ask about the north side, I guess.
No, I don't, I'm focused on the west side
West
only.
side.
Part of it is building code says.
What's the smallest size pool that could be built on the west side without encroaching?
There is none.
That was
Because
my
the-
question.
The building code says that the pool has to be 10 feet from the structural wall and your footings of the house. You would be, and we have footings on the pool, so as soon as we move the pool outside of that 10-foot mark, we're into the setback, even with like a 5-foot, 6-foot pool. There's no, if you look at the, the line, that dashed line and where the house is, that's only like 6 feet at that porch area. And so really, no matter how you put it there, it's going to end up into that setback. And they place the pool so that it's as close to the house to meet building code as really possible there without, trying to push the pool way out into the backyard, so.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. My other question is for staff. Is it true that half of the properties that have pools, or half of the properties have pools, and they're all encroaching? And if so, why is that?
Commissioner, good question, yes. 50% of the pools are encroaching. There are 2 pools on Lake Virginia in Newport.
So we've got 1 and 2.
In
There's
Victoria.
4, it's 2 of 4.
Yeah, but there's.
2 are
right.
encroaching out of the 4.
Yeah, so what it is one of the ones that we looked at was, has an encroachment, it's about 60 feet off. That was granted a variance because of a lift station had to be put on the property, which pushed the entire home back. And then there's some topography things, but about half of them are encroaching and were granted variance, or at least one of them was granted variances for. The other one was done a long time ago, and I wasn't able to dig enough information up to provide a reason why.
Are those ones in Victoria or Excelsior?
The ones that staff reference will always be in Victoria.
Okay, so there's 2 in Victoria, to your point, that are 60 or less. I also have a question for staff about, can you remind me, if we approve a variance, pool needs repair in 10 years, whatever, what is the process? Do they have to come back forward, get a new variance? And then similar, like, second question to that is, these guys, win the lottery and decide to go move to Mexico, and now there's new owners, because I know you guys don't want to move, right? And the new owners want to do something different. Did they have to come get a new variance? What are the next steps if a variance is approved?
So that's an excellent question on the procedural process. If the planning commission, regardless of what the planning commission recommends, this will go to the city council for final consideration. The variance is granted for the setback change. So it's on the actual ordinance itself saying that instead of 100 feet for the setback can be encroached, in this case, 28 feet or 24 feet or whatever the final number gets decided to be. that setback is for any structure. It's not specific to just a pool. So in 3 months after this is constructed, the Stockmans win the lottery and go to Mexico and somebody wants to put a different style pool in, they would be still granted that land right to put in a pool and have that setback. Now, if there are issues with maintenance or there are other things that cause detriments, there's a legal process to revoke the variance. As far as the specifics for that, I would want to consult the city attorney before commenting publicly, but
Yeah.
there is a process. It's not, this is done, and then no matter what happens in the future, there can't be corrective action or recourse done.
So just to clarify, if city council approves a variance, then that variance is for any structure to be put, any structure within code, that would be permissible under their zoning code, right? So like an outhouse or whatever, outhouse is the wrong word, a storage house, let's call it that, could potentially be built without another variance being needed.
Correct. This is for the variance itself, as long as the structure or the action taken on the property is legally done inside the R1 zoning code, which is currently at, or whatever zoning code it could change to in the future. It's highly unlikely to happen, but what we're doing, if you take a look at the screen, the request is for a reduction or an encroachment into the setback of section 22-6D of the city zoning code, which falls underneath our shoreland overlay district. Regardless of the structure that's there, basically what we're doing is we're saying there's a 100-foot line, and we're gonna move the 100-foot line to a different spot, and then whatever legally can be placed on the property could be placed within that new area.
For perpetuity until that variance is legally revoked.
Correct.
So, quick question on that, just as a follow-up. So the variance to install a pool, I mean, that doesn't have a bind. It's actually the land line adjustment.
Correct.
Anything.
The intent of
understand the rest, yeah.
correct. The intent of the request is to build a pool, and in order to build a pool, they have to request the setback be changed,
Yeah.
or they be granted an exception, a variance to that requirement.
But
So
I guess I'm thinking through this, what seems to be a bait and switch, like they're gonna get a variance for the pool and then build something else. And I don't
I mean, I'm not worried about that. It's like even 25, 30 years on the road, like, again, these guys want to build a pool, but the next person comes in, or the other thing, like, I know we don't think it's going to set precedent, but it sets a precedent of you're encroaching on the 100-foot line. Now the next person comes in and says, well, they got to do it for pool and I want to put in whatever. Like, what do we have to stand on to say no then at that point? I don't.
Chair, Commissioners, I'd just like to reiterate, when we look at a variance, we're looking at the city code. And we're looking at the city code, we're looking at a very specific line of the city code. In this case, it's the 100-foot setback for the shoreline. If the variance request, if there was, you could only do, say our code said that you could only do a pool that's 12 by 14 feet, and an applicant came in and said they wanted to do a larger pool, then we would be looking at a variance for the dimensional standards of the pool to be larger. But in this case, we're specifically looking at just a setback, and anything legally allowed inside our zoning code and inside our performance standards, and all the other setbacks and everything else still have to be maintained regardless of what structure's put here. I do know that we have pool applications that go back to the 70s and early 80s, and those properties still have pools. So it is unlikely, but if the pool was removed by the next owner and they put in a detached garage, they would still be permitted to be at that setback line. Yeah.
But don't we still have to get a permit?
Yeah,
They would still have to grant a permit to build, correct?
correct. Yep.
It's not like I could just go and build a garage. I'd have to apply for a permit to build that garage.
Right, but that permit just has to be applied for.
Right.
And as long as you're meeting every other city code, because you extended your variance and even now extended your setback, it just gets approved. It doesn't get, there's no like,
They just
Yeah, it just gets approved. So, and again, like this is, we have to think through like the entire city and all the planning and bigger picture here. I'm just trying to make sure we think through like a big picture here, what
The
this
question
sets.
is, let's say your kids go off to college, you say, we don't want this pool, we're gonna fill it with cement, and we're gonna put a addition onto the house for a pickleball court or indoor gym or whatever. You're allowed at that point to do that as long as you don't go past the 73-foot setback.
In my
That is in your variance.
We had this with our cabin too, because we had a historical cabin that had a portion that was within the setback. And as I understood at the time this was Minnesota law and DNR code, anything they built would have to be on that exact same footprint. It couldn't be like, it's now 75 feet across our entire yard, right? It would have to be on the same footprint of what we got permitted, or is it?
You go 75 feet, you can put a,
75
you
Yeah,
can
that
go
was different than
the-
what they allowed
the
us
width
to do
of
with
your
our own
house.
cabin. We had to put it on the exact, anything that was in front of the encroachment had to be on the exact same place.
So, Chair, Planning Commission, to reiterate, that's a Wisconsin rule, and a Wisconsin, that's Minnesota. So, but what we're looking at is we're looking at a variance. We don't have the variance saying the request wasn't for a certain distance, it wasn't going horizontally across the setback line, it's for the entire line to be moved.
right.
So that is what's being considered tonight. If the Planning Commission wanted to look at something like that, it would take some staff investigation to find and double check the appropriate answer.
I have to say, I think we're going down a bit of a rabbit trail on other uses of the variance. I think it's a fair
Yes.
point and one to think about, but for me, really nothing has changed compared to our analysis the last time, in the sense that there are two issues. The first issue is really whether there's a practical difficulty which is created by the land itself and not by something that the owners want to do on the land. The land hasn't changed since you bought the property. The placement of the home hasn't changed since you bought the property. The question really is it a practical difficulty because you can't put the pool on the west side of the property? And I don't know what the precedents are, but that brings me to the second point, which is that, and we've sort of been dancing around that, what we are doing is setting precedent, and we've seen that here. I mean, you cite other examples as precedents of variances that have been granted, and they should be indeed extremely rare, because that's why we have a building code and ordinances. They're meant to be followed, and I just worry that if we start granting variances routinely, that the zoning code and ordinances will become sort of, a starting point for negotiation. And that's really not the intent. These are unpleasant conversations, because you want to do something that's good for your property, good for your family, and we're just looking at the impact across the board. What does it mean if other people come forward and say, well, the Stockmans were able to do this with their property, so why can't we do something similarly within the setback on our property? And that's where you get into things like, pickleball courts and saunas and everything else within the setback. So
Okay.
that's my view. Sorry.
Well, first of all, before we move forward, we need to open a public hearing.
I think we've done that.
Is there anyone in the chambers this evening who wish to comment on this item? Besides the homeowners? Seeing none, commissioners, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Well, you can come back. This is for anybody else. You're the property owners. This would be for anybody else that would want to, so, yeah, you can come back up.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. The public hearing is closed. I will now open the floor for the Planning Commission to discuss. Commissioners, any other questions? Want to come up? Yeah. Sure.
The alternative location. So we've been working with Travis in the city to figure out if is there anything else we could do to make this less egregious. And so the primary location is there. There's a secondary location. That's not it. Sorry, that right there. So where we basically try to push it over to meet the 10 foot as much as possible. And that makes the pool's edge variance 8.8 feet. Now again, the cons of this alternative plan are that while it minimizes the encroachment to 8.8 feet, or 12 feet, well, it would be 8.8 plus an 18-foot edge. So 11 feet, 10 feet, whatever we call it. The downside is, again, that drainage is an issue, and we have to reroute that. We have to build large engineered retaining walls to make it work because of that drainage issue. So it's less ideal. You know, you're cutting into that hill. It's not flat like right behind our house, but it does minimize the encroachment. And this is basically the point was, is there any place on our property that we could place a pool? There's not one that doesn't, go into the encroachment. This is one that minimizes encroachment. Again, there's some downsides to it in the sense that, we still have to reroute drainage. We have to build engineered retaining walls to make it work, but it does minimize the encroachment. So we just wanted to bring that up as an alternative if there's any other considerations. If it's the encroachment is the main issue.
I just want to go back to the conditions of a variance, if we can, because it's reasonable. It doesn't change the look of the property or the value of the surrounding neighbors. But when you talk about practical difficulties or financial hardship or hardships, I just don't think it's reasonable to suggest that you're getting a hardship by not building a pool. And so I feel like if I wanted to build something on my property and somebody said, call it a basketball court, and it was impervious, and I couldn't build it. Well, that's a luxury item for me to have, and me having to build that somewhere else, I have a hard time finding that to be a financial hardship for me. So not meeting that kind of takes away the teeth of the request of the variance. So I'm trying to figure out how I want you to build a pool. Like you bought the home, you want to be able to do it, but you knew the home's layout when you bought it. The setback was there. Nothing changed in the setback or the lot lines since purchase. So my issue with it is that that change doesn't seem to me a hardship of I had to build it somewhere else, right? A retaining wall, for example. You'd have to reroute the drainage, like that's the obligation. So where am I off?
I think that those are all the facts that led us to the same conclusion last time. I think to your point, wanting to build a pool is obvious and understandable, and it naturally looks like the right place on this lot. Absolutely. Just in the layout, I mean, I may be the one that switches here because, again, if you want to have the pool, that's great. There have been other homes in the community that have had a variance, and we've had some go through. I think the mitigating things in this case are similar to what we saw in Tamarack Trail, where there's an intent and effort to mitigate the risk associated with the lake. And to your point, if there was another place to pull it back and that could work and there's more cost to it, I'm less inclined to see that as a hardship as well. But I do think in listening to some of the other places on the property without, certainly on the north side, the slope in the water, that would be problematic for the home. And again, could it be done? Probably not enough space. So for me, I mean, this is one where I might see that your variance being justified. I think you've looked at all the others. I would want conditions on it in terms of my kind of, in those things you were talking about, putting in the, the permeable pavers, putting in the plantings, the native plantings to give it more, restoration on that side. And a lot could be done, and those would be the types of things that would show kind of an interest in trying to get this as a compromise. And I think it's rare, and the reason I'm coming to this is we've got all of the set of circumstances that are on each property, and this one is quite unique. And I have been one of those homeowners when you have 45 minutes to look at the house, and it's the dream house that you wanted, and you kind of make that choice. I think that's why I'm living in Victoria, is we made that choice. So you might not have had that due diligence, and I can understand that thing that you overlook when you see the rest of it that you like. So maybe I'm the one that changes, but I think you've done all the things that you could do to find an alternate. And in this case, if there are those conditions to do what I was mentioning, I probably know where my vote is.
So the objective for sure is that we're here to make things happen, quite frankly, and whether it's you or the developer at the same time, we're not, we don't want to be a roadblock, but we have to do it within the confines. A precedent is an absolute reality, because it will come back to the Planning Commission. So, again, I don't have to go all the way through it, but here was another one that was approved, and what's the story with you guys at the same time? So I think it's a complex lot, obviously, and you brought it to us, and then you went back again, and it's still the precedent, whether we like that term or not, but it is a precedent that will be set, and that's where we're at.
What,
So are you, I got a question for you, homeowner. Are you adding the patio and the hot tub and the pool?
Correct. The idea would be to do the whole project, yes.
Okay.
I have a question regarding the size and positioning of the pool. You mentioned that it was to be 18 by 36, and I'm assuming the 36 is what encroaches into the
No,
setback?
it's the 18 actually that encroaches. The 36 is the length. It's the 18.
I was wondering if there's a way to turn it.
We've looked at a lot of different angles, but we're open to ideas, for sure.
let me ask a
Make it
question.
15 by
What-
30 instead of 18 by 36?
Still-
You know,
It's gonna
still-
encroach, so the question is, it's kind of like the
How
alternative
much?
plan we showed. It's how much you got, we're willing to give an encroachment.
Travis and Brian, what is in the exception language? It's clearly practical difficulty or hardship. It's or,
Commissioner,
the exception to
Oh, at the very-
allow a variance.
The
Practical difficulties in a variance are those 3 points that we've talked about: the uniqueness, the reasonableness, and the character of the neighborhood. Those are the practical difficulties. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And the statutory language is the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the landowner. So the hardship is unique to the property and not because.
But the hardship is what if we could clearly make it a hardship, it would be,
there's the uniqueness of there's a drive-in, it's very narrow for a
Yeah.
while, and then it has that triangle, and they put the house originally there, which was allowed.
Can we get the plan
But
back
you
up?
couldn't put it on the other side of the house, and
But just,
was,
I guess
uh,
I'm having
is
a hard
unique.
time with understanding how just putting it in general creates a hardship. Like not being able to put something you want, is that a hardship?
I mean, if you want to think about it the other way, it'd be more like, because of the lot shape, that's the hardship, right?
That's how I view it.
Yeah.
That's how I.
Because of the way the
It's
hardship
not the
is.
pool that's the hardship.
We,
Yeah, it's-
as defined as, are you able to do something that's permitted use? No, because of the hardship of your lot, you're not able to do something that is a permitted use, which is adding the pool as a permitted use.
Yeah, that's
That's
fair.
the way it leads.
Yeah.
And the hardship for the Stockmans is the fact that if we try to put the pool on the north side of the house, because of the way that the house is situated on that lot and the way that the lot itself is graded, the lot, can you put the slide back on that shows the lot with the pool? So on the north side of the lot, up at the front corner of the garage, there's very minimal space. The entire front of the lot, which is substantial, drains through the north side of the lot. There is no other drainage path for that whole side. If you try to put a pool in, and this is where my problem becomes from the builder's standpoint, I cannot put the pool there. And the reason is that it's going to flood out, and we're gonna flood the house out, because if you look at the front corner of that house, when it comes through over on the right-hand corner of the garage, it's literally up against the setback. As it comes through, there's a drainage swale that maintains the entire front yard water from the driveway over to the neighboring property. It swales and then allows the water to flow down through the lake. That swale goes right through the north side where we would put a pool. The only way to put even a small pool there would be to build the retaining walls up to the point where they match the grades at the front side of the garage, and then we would have to push the water towards the side lot line. Because there's not enough space there, if you put a pool in to do that, we're going to move all of the water into the neighboring property, or we're gonna flood their house out. It's one or the other. There is no other choice. So to put the pool, while there is space there, to put the pool in on that side of the lot, even a tiny pool, it just doesn't work with modern building code and the drainage situation. And that's what's creating the hardship, not the pool itself. So the only way that we can feasibly put a pool in is that we have to go into the setback. The question becomes, to what degree do we go into the setback? Ideally, the original plan puts it in a much flatter plane. It doesn't require a bunch of retaining wall work, but it is farther into the setback. The secondary plan that we've been toying with and went back and forth on pushes it into the yard more, so it's outside of your setback, and it encroaches less extensively into that setback. But there is no way to do it without encroaching somewhat into the setback. It's a trade-off. Do you build retaining walls on the property? You have less of a pool into the setback itself, or do you put the pool behind the house where we're encroaching, 24 feet into the setback, but we don't have a bunch of, extensive retaining wall work? That retaining wall work, for the most part, is not going to be in the setback. It's going to be inside the yard itself. But that's the big question, but we can put it towards the right-hand side and keep it, inside the setback significantly more.
Thanks. I have one more point. So the size of a lot, preventing you from doing a permitted use. So there's several houses around mine in my neighborhood that aren't big enough to put in, the lot's not big enough to put in the pool, and a pool's a permitted use.
But this one's big enough. It's
Right,
like
but that's
all the
just
other-
another restriction of owning
Right.
the property.
Right,
So
but it's
mine
all the
wasn't,
other
my property may not be big enough to put in a pool.
right.
Yours might not be big enough because it has a setback.
Yeah.
Yours
that's a
might
fair
not
point.
be wide enough, tall enough, round enough. to do something else, but we're creating a variance for it.
Right.
No, so then the next person that comes up and has a small lot and says, you know what, it's permitted use to have a pool.
Yeah.
My lot's too small, I want to go over the impervious, no mitigation, then what?
It's like when this house was built, previous homeowners said, well, I want to be as close to the lake as I want to get. And I don't, because I want the view of the lake, I don't want whatever. I don't care about putting a patio or a pool in the back. So they built the house where they built the house. And now you guys bought it after the previous owners moved out, and it's built to where it is. But why is that? That's where I'm having that whole discussion in my head about, yes, if I want to put a pickleball court back here and it's over the setback, it's a permitted use, but I shouldn't be able to do it because I don't have the room. We have developments in town that, you know, have side yard setbacks that are way too under code that we've done PUDs on. And someday they're gonna come and say, well, I wanna do this. Well, it's a hardship. And it's a variance. I need a variance to get to do this. Are we setting a precedence, just creating variances to do stuff because the house was built incorrectly on the lot at the time or isn't there? I understand, I mean, I could go either way on it as long as I would have some conditions that you would have to use permeable pavers, you'd have to do the mitigation to the trees that you were talking about doing. Seen houses on Lake Minnetonka that are 25 feet within Lake Minnetonka. Now granted, where was that before they even came up with a shoreline ordinance? I don't know. But I understand, you know, the other side of going down to the lake and destroying the lakeside or creating a beach down there. So there's good pluses and minuses to, and then just the experience having been able to do what you want to do. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of going back and forth, I know. But
Earlier, there was something about a June date.
Can I just ask you a question? Why is it 100 feet? Most of Lake Minnetonka is 75 feet. Almost none of the rest of the cities around you are 100 feet. We build pools tons on Lake Minnetonka and every other lake around, and there is no one has a 100-foot setback. It's an extraordinary setback to begin with.
I'd like you to speak in the microphone, please.
Sorry. You know, it's an extraordinary setback at 100 feet. Almost all of the lakes around here, including Minnetonka, on every other city is 75 feet. I mean, it's an exceptional setback.
Travis?
Chair,
DNR is
Chair
not
Commission,
controlled.
to say where the 100-foot setback is, I went back and researched the 1998 city code. That 100-foot setback existed in 1998. The shoreland information goes back into the 70s as well as into the 80s for different decisions being made. There's different recommendations that have been made over the years by the DNR. There's been different rules put in place, but most importantly, the city has the right to establish minimum setbacks. And we can do that underneath the guidance that's provided by the DNR. So when a setback is set, regardless of other communities and their standards, the city of Victoria has every right to set its own standards.
Yes, I was on the commission at the time we set that 100-foot setback. And I think a lot of it was coming at the time from the DNR, kind of recommending, because of all the lakes we have around here and new developments coming in and trying to control some of that. But there was a lot of discussion. We did
It
read
is an
it.
extraordinary setback that we deal with. I mean, it's, you know, I've got 5 pools going on Lake Minnetonka right now. Not a single one of them is 100 feet from the lake. They're all 75 feet from the lake.
Again, that's what our ordinance is.
Yeah, I
and-
know, but
And I can't, you know, unless we want to rechange the ordinance, but again, I know in 1998, we went through a lot of meetings on the shoreland ordinance and a lot of discussions about it. And I know it kind of even, it came a lot to, with the DNR's recommendations
okay.
at the time. And-
Because I think the Stockmans are more than happy to work with the DNR to mitigate any drainage concerns, to mitigate any issues that are there.
And I think the DNR didn't,
Chair, Commission, just on a process point, talking with the DNR, if a variance was to be granted by the city, what would still happen is an application for the pool would still need to be submitted to the city, would still need to be approved by the city, as well as reviewed, at a minimum reviewed by the DNR prior to anything taking place. So the DNR was asked general questions and provided general feedback. And to staff, it was more specific to, well, what are the plans going to be when they come in? So they want to see the application. As far as the setbacks and things like that, I would like to point out that the current model ordinance with the DNR has a 100-foot setback as well in it.
So to that point, the DNR would be going through its review, and they could render a judgment of not allowing it if a variance was approved in that situation?
The Commissioner, the DNR has given the city the opportunity to make the decision whether the city would want to grant a variance or not. If the city denies the variance, the DNR is okay with that. If the city grants a variance, the DNR is okay with that, and they would be the ones making recommendations and requests for specific types of mitigation controls and other natural resource protections. So that's where that would sit. Ultimately, the question comes down to providing a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council on whether the Planning Commission believes that a variance should be granted and at what distance, because we have seen 2 different distances, and we've talked about 3 different distances tonight. Also, if it is approved, if there's any special conditions that would want to be on there, mind you, it wouldn't be providing direction to any other government agency such as the DNR, the watershed, or the county to take certain actions, or if there's a denial. And if there's a denial for the recommendation, the Planning Commission would want to state on what purpose, what part of the practical difficulties test is failed. So that's what we're looking at. As far as the reasons why the 100-foot setback is there, it's in our code. We have to follow our code. This is the process for doing that. The other process can be a zoning text amendment. That is a lengthy process because it does require the city to apply for a variance to the DNR to get that changed anyways. So this is the shorter process, the more effective. We're looking at the setback line for a permitted use on an R1 property, and having that permitted line being moved from 100 feet from the ordinary high water mark to 72 feet or more from the high water mark. So that's the main focus of tonight, and that's the main thing that I believe that we should continue the track on the discussion.
And that goes to the question earlier. There was a date posted about June 30th, 2020.
When a land use application is submitted, whether it be a conditional use permit or whether it be a PUD, or in this case, a variance, the city gets put underneath what's called the 60-day rule. from the point that the city staff determined that the application is complete, we get put on a 60-day clock or the city council gets put on a 60-day clock to make a decision. If a decision is not made within the 60 days, then the application as applied for is automatically granted. The city, what we've done, because this would not go back to the city council until the 24th of March, the 25th of March is actually when the 60 days is up. So we've extended an additional 60 days, which we're permitted to do by statute, to allow to further the discussion, especially with getting new information about the slopes on the property and some drainage issues, and allowing the applicant to get another chance to show that there could be significant challenges and maybe they have practical difficulties to the property. Ultimately, that's what we're here to decide. But ultimately, the planning commission the city council will need to take an action by May 25th. Else the applications as amended would be processed and would become law.
I'm kind of at a best and final offer next round and table it.
Yeah. Any other discussions? I get a motion.
I would move that the application for variance be denied.
I got a motion. Second.
Second?
I got a motion and a second. To recommend denial to the city council of the variance request for zoning ordinance section 2.6D
22.6D.
to permit a pool encroachment 28 feet into the shoreline setback for the intention of installing a pool patio on the property of 6580 Aster Trail due to hardship.
Chair, we would ask in the motion that the reason for denial as far as the practical difficulties is stated as part of the recommendation. We'll pass that along to the city council as well.
So, do you want me to amend the motion?
Yes, please.
I would amend the motion to state that the application for variance be denied on the basis that the owner has not established practical difficulties in the sense that the difficulty is not inherent in the condition of the property, but rather the use to which the owners wish to make on the property, and to invade the statutory or ordinance setback.
Motion. You have a second?
Someone second. Yeah, John did.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Come back, see what the city council has to say, I guess.
Yeah, we're only a recommending body.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our other item for discussion. Revised sketch plat for West Creek Village residential development. Sketch plat review is an initial stage of the review that the Planning Commission reviews this and considers regarding development proposals. There are no formal actions or recommendations taken by the Planning Commission at the time of the sketch plat review. Sketch plat review process is intended for the applicant to receive initial feedback from the Planning Commission in advance of any necessary preliminary plat or zoning applications. I will now turn it over to City Planner Brian McCain for staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So this development proposal has been before you back in August of 2024, I believe. They did submit a preliminary application, but there were some discrepancies between staff's review and the application submitted, so they decided to pull their preliminary plat application and bring forward a new concept for the Plan Commission and City Council to consider. Now, as the chair just mentioned, this is a sketch plat process, so this is just to give the developer feedback on their proposed concept. If it's agreeable to the Plan Commission and City Council, they can be directed to move forward with a preliminary plat. But a lot of this will be familiar information for you, but starting at the very beginning, the location and area, this is just to the west of the Marsh Hollow development. It consists of two parcels, approximately 90 acres in size. It's north of County Road 10, just past the railroad tracks if you're heading westbound on 10. It is also south of the Marsh Lake Hunting Club. Now, this revised concept that they've proposed alters the uses a little bit. I think originally they'd proposed 156 townhomes and 15 single-family lots. Here they're going for 36 single-family homes, 18 twin homes, and 56 townhomes. For the existing conditions of the property, it's a generally flat, vacant farmland. There are some wetlands present, as you can see on the screen in the colored portions. And there is an area of West Chaska Creek on the north side in the wooded area. You can probably just barely see the wording there, but that is the creek. So here is the revised sketch plat that was submitted. So they still have the single-family larger lots north of Creekside, similar to the Huntersburg Creekside development. Those are within shoreland, so they'll have to comply with shoreland standards. And then they have twin homes in this small row. I'm trying to point with my cursor, but I just realized now that you guys can't see because of our technical difficulties, so my apologies for that. But the southwest edge of the development, you can see some twin homes, those back-to-back units on the west side of the long winding road going down towards 10. And then on the east side of that road, they're proposing some single-family units there. And then up near the northwest edge, that cluster of townhomes, those 4 to 6 unit row homes that they're showing, those are those townhomes I mentioned. As part of this, they do have a future extension of Creekside Lane coming from the Marsh Hollow development to the east that would curve up and go towards the western boundary with a temporary cul-de-sac there until future development occurs further west of them. They have something similar with a street down towards the bottom of the development as well, going to that western border. Looking at our comprehensive plan, this area is guided for a mix of low density, medium density. Each of those have their own density ranges. So low density, 2.25 to 6 units per acre, medium density, 6 to 12, and then also open space. And across the railroad towards the south side of the site, you can see a very small strip of commercial designation with it. With this concept that's proposed, they would need 3 comprehensive plan amendments. The first one would be some modifications to the low and medium density areas. As I've told you all in the past, the Metropolitan Council likes to see land uses align exactly with what is being built. So single family should be in low density, twin homes, townhomes, if they fall within 6 to 12 or 12 to 36, they should meet the according future land use designation. So that's the first comp plan amendment they would need. Secondly is the conservation residential district for those larger lots that are adjacent to the creek. Those would not meet our 2.25 units per acre density range, so they would need to seek a comp plan amendment for the conservation residential designation, which allows half a unit per acre up to 2.25. And then thirdly, they would just have to change that small area of commercial to open space because it's largely consumed by wetlands. It's not developable, so we should change that while we can. Then looking onto the actual density calculations for this revised concept, I spent some time today going through these. and the Metropolitan Council gave us a breakdown of what our current density guidance is throughout the city. So right now, we're just under 3.5. We're at 3.47 units per acre. Our guidance in the 2040 requirement is for a citywide 3 units per acre. So we're still about a half unit above that requirement. With this proposed development, that would only bring us down 0.09. So we would be at 3.36 units per acre after this development, and the necessary comp plan adjustments are made. Looking at each type of use individually, though, those conservation lots that I mentioned, those would result in 0.62 units per acre, falling within that conservation residential guidance. The standard single-family homes on the east side of that winding road for the south side of Creekside, that would fall about 2.5. That's within our guidance for low density. And then for the twin homes and townhomes, that falls within our 6 to 12 units per acre. So those would fit a medium density guidance in our comp plan as well. Now, what those changes actually would look like on a map, as I mentioned, the Met Council likes to have land uses aligned directly with what they are in our future land use map. So this was just a rough sketch I put together to show what that change would look like. Overall, a slight reduction in that medium density. That's where we're losing that 0.09 units per acre citywide, but really not a drastic change overall. Looking at annexation and rezoning, so this is within Laketown Township, so an annexation is required. It has been approved by the township, so now it's just up to the city to approve an annexation with a preliminary plat submittal. When it is annexed, it automatically has a agricultural zoning established, so that would need to be changed with any future applications for rezoning. As part of this request, for the single-family homes, they would be requesting a PUD with underlying R1. And then based on my initial calculations and review of the concept, they would be meeting the standard requirements for the twin homes and townhomes. So our planned unit development process, I always like to include this when we have a PUD potential application in front of us. So it's to allow innovative, creative, and flexible development that is sensitive to environment or other considerations that's in partnership with public values. The sketch plat is the first process where we provide initial input, or the Plan Commission and City Council provide initial input for the applicant. Then the details are approved during preliminary plat, and then the ordinance for the PUD is adopted at final. So here are the deviations that I noticed with the proposed concept plan in front of you this evening. This figure right here for the proposed minimum lot area is likely higher. These are just the numbers that were given to me initially. But I'm still listing it as a deviation in case they are proposing less than 12,000 square feet for the single family lots. Minimum lot width of 56 feet. What that would do is they would have a 40-foot wide building product and then 8-foot side yard setbacks on each side. So that's where they get that 56 feet. The minimum lot depth, they're requesting to reduce that from 130 feet to 100, and the front setback from 30 feet to 25 feet, which is pretty standard for what we see for PUDs nowadays. And then the maximum impervious, because the lots are going to be smaller, they're requesting larger impervious. In terms of square footage, they're not really changing anything compared to our current developments. It's just allowing for that higher percentage for them to get 3, 4, 5,000 square feet of impervious, depending on the lot size. And then for the R3 requirements, as you can see here, they aren't proposing any deviations, or I didn't note any deviations we're requiring for the twin homes or the townhomes. And then the non-shoreland lots for the single family, those are going to be those larger lots. They're going to meet all our minimum requirements, so no PUD is required for those. Moving on to the architectural renderings that were provided, these are some of the single family products that would be built for the single family homes within the cul-de-sac north of Creekside and on that straight street on the south side of Creekside for the single-family homes. These are the twin home products. You can see some portions are grayed out. These are really to accentuate the end units of what their townhome styles are. Basically, if you can imagine these back to back, that's what they would envision for their twin homes. Just two end units put together. And then lastly, their townhome product that hasn't changed from last time that the Planning Commission saw this sketch plat. Moving on to the streets and parking. So in the previous sketch plat that you all saw, they had proposed public streets throughout the development, except for those two private drives for those six single-family homes on the north side. Here, they would make those 58 townhomes as private street. We really want to get feedback from the Planning Commission and City Council on the thoughts of having a small section of private street exclusively for the townhomes within this development, or if that street should be public as well. Additionally, for the parking, they appear to meet all the parking requirements. We don't have any guest stall requirements at the moment. That's something we're working on in our zoning code revisions. But based on the architectural renderings you just saw, they're going to be meeting the enclosed space requirements for the single family and the townhome units. So looking at pedestrian connections, this is another situation that we want to get Planning Commission and City Council feedback on. They are proposing a 8-foot wide trail connected to the Marsh Hollow development. So on the south side of this development, they would have a trail cutting through the wetlands to connect to Marsh Hollow. I believe our Parks and Rec Committee and staff are very supportive of this. The other change here is that they have a 8-foot trail shown on the south side of Creekside Lane with a sidewalk on the north side connecting the cul-de-sac and the private drive to the east. Staff's preference, we'd like to get back to our collector or our residential collector road standard, which is trail on both sides throughout the stretch of Creekside Lane through this development. We'd like to get feedback on Planning Commission and City Council's thought on that as well. And then lastly, they are proposing sidewalks on at least one side throughout this development. When it comes to the townhomes, we have a suggestion, I guess, in our code. It says may, not shall, that if a development is exceeding 3 units per acre, they may put in sidewalks on both sides. So we want some feedback from Planning Commission on City Council if this is a situation where they would prefer to see sidewalks on both sides for the townhome portion. Landscaping and tree preservation, this is pretty standard stuff. You all have seen this before. They're required to plant boulevard trees and a certain number of trees based on the type of zoning. So 3 trees for R1 lots and then 1 tree and 1 shrub for every 1,000 square feet of required open space for those R3 homes. And then a buffer would be required between R1 and R3 uses in our code, and then also a minimum 50% of open space for the R1 areas and 25% for R3. There are some trees on the site. We'll have to evaluate how many are removed with a preliminary plat submittal. They are allowed to remove 20% without a mitigation requirement. So that's what that minimum 80% preservation is about. If they preserve 80%, they don't have to add any more additional trees than our landscape requirements. As I mentioned, there's a small portion within the Shoreland Overlay District. That area consists of 300 feet within West Chaska Creek. So those requirements for those lots, a maximum 25% impervious and a minimum 75-foot lot width. In discussions with the developer, all the single-family homes north of Creekside should meet these requirements. And then parkland dedication, I have some figures crossed out here. This is what was in the report prior to receiving actual unit counts, and our park dedication requirements are based on the number of units and type of units going in. So I left that unchanged from the last time the Planning Commission reviewed this, but now that we have updated information regarding the number of single-family, twin homes, townhomes, I was able to update those numbers. So it's actually a reduction down to 3.65 acres in total, or $383,600 in total. In this situation, it's one or the other, but the developer can always have, they're proposing a 1/4 acre park that can be reduced from either of those requirements, as well as the 8-foot trails that they're provided, those can be reduced. So whatever combination comes out of cash and land dedication. And then our Parks and Rec Committee did review this twice. They actually did review the preliminary plat that was submitted that never made it to the Planning Commission. Their recommendation was pretty much the same, that they were supportive of cash fee or some sort of alternative parkland dedication. Just because I believe this development is in relatively close proximity to the Marsh Hollow Park that will be designed and built within the next few years here. And then the Highway 10 accesses. So I believe the last time we talked, it was potentially proposed to be a private exit for the development. That's not the case here. This would be a gated emergency access only. So only for emergency vehicles to utilize. All the traffic within this development would be funneled out through Creekside Lane. Carver County did review this. They're agreeable to the temporary access. They would just like to see it removed once development occurs to those to the west, and the Creekside Lane and that other street with the cul-de-sac bulb, those roads are extended so that people have other ways to get out of the neighborhood. Moving on to Kara's stuff, grading and stormwater management. It's the usual things here. They have to meet the CCWMO rules, including wetlands being platted within buffers that are deeded to the city, and stormwater facilities should have access provided within the outlot and cannot encroach onto private property. The site utilities would be extended from Creekside Lane from the east. Well number 6 must also be completed and permitted by the DNR. Well, it is completed now, so just permitted by the DNR before services outside of our current city limits can be served. And then we are also looking for an area for our future water treatment plant out here. So if this is the parcel that Planning Commission and City Council thinks staff should explore a water treatment plant further, the developer and the city need to be guided to do so in that situation. And lastly, for the Planning Commission, once again, no action is required this evening. I do have some bullet points up on the screen for you for discussion topics. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd like feedback regarding those sidewalks on both sides for the townhome, regarding the trail on both sides for Creekside Lane, and then the public or private street for the townhome. So those are 3 things I think Josh and I would both like some feedback on this evening. And then lastly, this is a new question I'm going to start asking Planning Commission so that we can really get direct feedback from the Planning Commission and City Council for the applicant to move forward. Is this sketch plat sufficient? Do you think they're ready to move on to preliminary plat? So with that, staff is ready for any questions you have, and the applicant is in the audience this evening.
Thank you, Brian. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good evening, Chair Kuhn and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Josh Metzer with Lennar, Minnesota. We're out of the Plymouth office. Yeah, Brian summarized it pretty well. If you recall, we were here back in August, I think, with a different version of the concept plan. That was actually the second plan. The original plan we had, I guess to summarize, the north side has always kind of stayed the same, the north side of Creekside. But it's the south that has gone through a few changes, mostly because trying to chase a medium density requirement to get the units up to the minimum requirement while dealing with kind of a long linear site with wetlands. It's a pretty tight site. Originally, we had shown 156 townhomes down here. But once we got into kind of looking and evaluating stormwater treatment, we just needed more space for stormwater, so it reduced from 156 townhomes to 148 on the south side. We had the previous layout shown the way it did with a public street because we only have one access to a public street, and that's from Creekside, and you can't have 148 townhomes on a private street with one way in and out. So which is why we had a public street shown. Ultimately, staff wasn't comfortable with it once we got to planning. We were bringing a preliminary plat forward with 148 townhomes, and we were a couple days away from you seeing that preliminary plat, but when I noticed that staff's recommendation would have been for denial of that, really it came down to snow storage, I think was the big thing, concern about snow storage and possibly trying to fit in trees and fire hydrants and light poles in the right of way would have gotten tight. So we kind of stepped back and thought, we brainstormed some ideas, and we thought, well, it's medium density. Do we talk to city staff and find out if there's flexibility to re-guide it from medium density to low density, or some sort of mix of medium and low, which is what Brian had shown in that kind of SketchUp exhibit. So we're here now with the townhomes shown on that loop. That hasn't changed, that corner there. But we now have twin homes and single family homes shown here. That brings the density, originally the density south of Creekside was at 6 units per acre, which was right at that minimum threshold for medium density. If we were to have lost 1 unit below that 148, we would have been below the medium density requirement. What we're looking at here is 4.5 units per acre. So it's going down in unit count, it's going down in density, but hopefully Brian and the calculations are correct, and Met Council will agree with the re-guidance to a lower density than what the comprehensive plan currently shows. So the 55-foot wide lots, we chose those because they would be, in our opinion, comparable to what's across the wetland there in Marsh Hollow. Looking at the plat from Marsh Hollow, those lots were 51 feet wide, and I couldn't quite tell the side yard setbacks, but it looked like it was somewhere between 7 or 8 foot side yard setbacks. We would be proposing 55-foot wide lots with a 56 foot wide lots, so we can achieve 8-foot side setback on each side with our 40-foot wide home. Brian did point out a couple of deviations that we'd be requesting as far as lot depth and impervious surface. Now that's only for about, I think, 8 of those single family lots, because we have a couple of pinch points on where the road kind of curves, because behind us you've got a wetland, and those wetlands have a buffer area that we have to maintain, that we can't grade into. They have to be maintained in a natural state. So on a couple of those curves, it's a pinch point where we don't quite have enough depth to hit the minimum lot depth requirement. That's something that we didn't have to worry about when we had townhomes, because townhomes don't require the same sort of rear yard and rear yard setback that single family homes do and single family lots. So a bit of an unforeseen circumstance there, but we're still able to meet a 25-foot setback across the whole single family neighborhood. Still able to get our homes in there with at least I think a 30-foot rear yard to work with still at a minimum. So that what you're seeing there for deviations, that's not for all the single family homes, it's just for the few that are in those pinch points. Yeah, I guess that's a quick summary. I'm happy to answer any questions, and as Brian pointed out, certainly would welcome any feedback so we can make sure we're going in the right direction here with the revised preliminary plat.
Thank you, Josh.
We leave that up there, Brian?
Yep.
Question. There's only 16 feet between the single family homes?
8 feet on each.
Right, there would be, yep.
How does that compare to the other developments in our area?
Chair and Commissioners, just to note, I believe it was Hunter's Brook. The first ones that you had seen, they had their side setbacks reduced to 7.5. So, you're asking about other comparable developments out in the area? Yeah, so 15.
And I can speak for Brookmore, which is the community just north of Holy Family, which Lennar we brought through a couple years ago. That was 7.5 foot setbacks, I believe. I live in Laketown, just south of Deer Run. We have 7.5 foot setbacks in that neighborhood. So, and 7.5 foot is for us, you know, metro wide. That's for our single family homes. That's the standard setback we usually try to request. There's only been a couple circumstances where cities have required greater than 7.5. Here we are proposing 8 foot side setbacks. I think we're kind of attempting to try to meet most of the standards of the R2 district, which I understand is kind of a antiquated district now. It's for any developments that were pre-2019, but it's kind of an in-between zoning district between the R3 and R1. And for us, you know, just the standards of an R2, just looking at them, they are still listed in the code. They certainly lined up more with a single-family home that's directly across the street from twin homes and townhomes than what a standard R1 lot would look like. But the single-family lots north of Creekside would meet the standard R1 standard.
I guess the question on the private streets, yeah, what's the fire chief or fire access? I guess I'm looking at like that outlot E, outlot C, and then even just private streets to all the whatever. Street C. I don't know which one you were looking at, but I guess I'd want to make sure that the fire chief, we can get trucks in and out of there.
Chair and
See
Commissioners.
vehicles.
Yeah, so the fire chief has reviewed this concept multiple times. We talk about it at our development review meetings. He never stated a preference on if it was public or private. His concern, let me see if I can get my mouse here, was this corner right here within the townhomes and being able to basically park his fire truck on there because of the tight curve. So there might be some adjustments that need to be made to that curvature. I'll have to run that past our fire chief again, but he, from what I recall, did not have a preference on public or private.
How wide are the private streets?
So they should be, typically a private street is 24 feet wide, back to back. Public street is usually anywhere, depending on the city, 30 to 32 feet back to back.
Ours is 28, just for reference.
So 4 feet narrower.
But this
And
is
part
a
of the reason for
this is
going
a 24-foot private street, is what you're saying?
24 feet wide, correct, versus 28 for a public. And part of the reason we showed a private street just for the townhome portion here was staff's previous concern of snow storage. If it's a private street, it'll have to be, that private street portion would have to be cleared by the HOA's snow removal contractor.
And where would they put it?
Sorry?
I don't see an area where they would put it. There's no parking area, for instance, that could be sacrificed.
I mean, these are over 25 foot long driveways. We did have a snow storage exhibit that we submitted with the preliminary plat package. And as with any of our townhomes or villa communities, if there's major snow and there's no place to store it, if they've maxed out their areas here, it is hauled off-site. And that's part of our contracts with our the people that are hired to perform the snow removal. So that's not uncommon. And so the fire chief did review this even at a very detailed preliminary plat level. The two private streets on the north side of Creekside for the single families, they did comment on our initial design. They just requested that the turnaround, what do you call it? Why am I blanking on
The dead end.
Yeah, the not a T-bone, but anyway.
Cul-de-sac? Cul-de-sac?
No, but the temp turnaround, he basically asked that it be extended to the city standard, so that has been changed, revised to meet city standard. And the one comment on the temp cul-de-sac on the, what is the southwest, but if you're looking at it on the right side, it's, yeah, they're right by Brian's cursor, was requested that we change that from a temporary circular cul-de-sac to one that's similar to the ones up on the single-family area. Up
To
on top.
a hammerhead for
Hammerhead,
reference.
there we go. Thank you. And as far as the curve, that tight curve, I'll have to check with our engineer, but that is something that we worked with Kara on previously. The previous design wasn't meeting minimum turn radius standards, so that was slightly adjusted to meet minimum standards. So that's how we got to what private streets are shown here.
Excuse me. So just in kind of recapping, with it being private, it could be 4 feet narrower. So that's probably a choice that your team is recommending to. Would there be parking allowed on that street? Again, getting to the fire chief's kind of turn dimensions.
Chair and commissioners,
Would it be allowed?
our zoning code, or our municipal code actually, does not allow parking on streets that are 24 feet wide. If it's a 26-foot wide road, we allow parking on one side. If it's a 28-foot wide road, full public, we allow parking on both. So if, for this case, the private street, if it's 24 feet, we wouldn't allow any parking on it.
And I guess we didn't have that knowledge until right now. So if it's 26 and you would allow parking on 26, I'm sure we could manage to make that street 26 feet wide.
Because, yeah, that was, kind of that became the question is, why is it a private versus public? What are the trade-offs? And I didn't know if it was space in the back or that interior portion that was constraining it.
Having said that, there's not a lot of room for parking on that street, is there? I mean, it looks like almost all of the units have driveways that go out to the street, so there's very little room for parking. So if somebody has a gathering that requires more than driveway parking, where would they park?
So each of these has a 2-stall garage. The driveways are paved at a 2-stall width. At a minimum, you've got 25 feet from the property line to the front of the garage. Typically, unless, it's 4 pickup trucks, you can fit 4 cars in that driveway. And if we're not required to put a sidewalk on both sides, on the side that doesn't have a sidewalk, you're gonna have 25 plus, you're gonna have almost 40 feet from the curb to the front of the garage. Because that property line is typically 14 to 15 feet from the edge of the curb. So we're not, the 25-foot setback is required not from the curb, but from the front property line.
My bias would be towards private versus public street, just based on snow removal costs and maintenance costs being borne by the HOA versus the city being responsible.
Yeah, I was trying to get the context for, all of it.
Yeah, I think we would
Decision went this way.
recommend private, but with wider, I think where we're going, right? So you could do parking and deal with the fire hydrants
And we did
So
have a
saying
parking
there
exhibit.
might not be a lot of, when you think about a car going in between those, there might be a few places, there would be stretches where, but it's like, to me, that's like, I don't know that there's space between, but that, again, there's practical parking elsewhere.
And we did have a parking exhibit prepared for the previous plan. That was with the preliminary plat set. And in looking at it, there are certainly some areas where the driveways are tight and you can't park, but I was surprised at the number that you could fit there. People would have the option of parking on the east side of the tot lot and pond open space area along that whole stretch there. That's all public street.
Is that your outlot G?
Yeah, correct. Yep. You know, and there's where the road curves west of the tot lot. There's room for a number of spaces there. Again, where the private street curves kind of in a southeasterly direction back out to the public street. On that curve between buildings, there's quite a number of cars you can fit there. So
Sidewalks is mentioned as a concern as well of having the both sides. That's something the city would like to, but doesn't have a requirement. It was a may versus a shall.
Chair and Commissioners, that's correct. We'd like to get back to our standard of densities over 3 units per acre, having sidewalks on both sides. That, as I mentioned, as you just reiterated, that's a may, not shall, so it's a discretionary requirement. So that's why we want to ask the Planning Commission and City Council.
Given that this is already, like, this is a neighborhood already developed, is that gonna be weird then if all of a sudden you've got double sidewalks? I mean, I don't know, it's just aesthetics, maybe it doesn't matter.
The reason in this case that staff would be supportive of a second sidewalk here is because if you look at the layout of the sidewalks that are in this development, if you can see it, here's the sidewalk, for instance, along the single-family homes. Here's the sidewalk along the townhomes. How do people on the other side of the park reasonably reach the park and navigate through the neighborhood without just directly crossing the street, without a crosswalk or a sidewalk to guide them along the way? That was staff's reasoning for requesting sidewalks on both sides for the townhomes.
And the one quick point is, I would imagine this more than not, there's gonna be families with kids. And that would immediately have me leaning towards having it on both sides. If nothing more than, yeah, the density of this is gonna lead to younger families.
Yeah, quite a large population at the same time, and typically, would one side be city-owned, and then the other side HOA maintained, owned?
I think in this instance, they would both be private sidewalks since they're within the townhomes, if it's a public street. Now, if it's a 28-foot wide public street,
That would be
yeah.
city.
So are you looking,
And I guess maybe to throw another curveball at you, if we decided it was best for us to show this as a public street, would there be any objections to that?
I guess we could, either way would be, as long as it's snow, I mean, again, then you'd have, if it was a public street, the snow removal issue would be probably an issue.
Is there lighting requirements on public versus private, same?
Or residential.
There's no streetlights, right?
Street lighting.
Street lights, yeah. It's the same. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. And going back to the sidewalk point, Travis just made a good point to clarify. If it is sidewalks and it is a public street, the adjacent homeowner is required to clear the sidewalk of snow. Similar, like your single-family neighborhood, if you have a sidewalk coming through your driveway, you're responsible for the sidewalk that cuts through your property, right?
So here it would be the HOA.
These would be, you're talking a concrete sidewalk, not an asphalt pathway.
Correct. Yep.
And part of the reason for us requesting sidewalk on one side of the street is, again, snow removal. If you've got sidewalk on both sides of the street, that's snow storage for sidewalk on both sides of the street. And also maintenance and care that's, you know, if it's private, that's maintenance of that sidewalk that's on the HOA. just added costs. Not the end of the world, but just looking for ways to keep costs down for the HOA.
Putting driveways in, we crush every one of them, so.
What's that?
I work for a driveway company, and every driveway, every concrete sidewalk that gets put in that goes through it, when we go to put the driveway in, we end out pretty much cracking every sidewalk that.
And we actually, we did, that was a question that we did ask of Brian and Kara, and we may ask again at preliminary plat, is if sidewalks are required on both sides, if they can be installed when driveways are being installed, rather than putting a sidewalk in and having a construction, rock driveway while construction's happening, and inevitably
Sounds like a good idea.
Sidewalks will get destroyed.
Yeah.
Put them in when driveways are going in.
I do think snow removal is going to be a big issue for the HOA because nobody is going to want to pay the cost to haul snow off their property. And if we have sidewalks on both sides, that will increase the HOA's cost to get rid of that snow. For what it's worth.
It is, I mean, and if you make it a public street, then the city's got
Exactly.
issues getting rid of the snow along with.
I mean, either way, the
It's
HOA contractor's gonna have to get that snow off site. It's not like they're gonna be able to dump it out on the street.
Right.
Is there not sufficient, what is that grass called between the road and the sidewalk?
Boulevard.
The boulevard, there's not sufficient boulevard for that snow to just be plowed up on the sides?
I mean,
And then the sidewalk?
Depends on the year.
I mean, ours has, I don't know if it's like 6 feet or something over where we are, and, there's never issues in plowing the snow up against the sidewalk. But I guess when you got driveway,
Exactly.
you're pushing that berm.
and I mean, and these guys aren't coming out with a giant city truck. These are guys with Jeeps and pickup trucks with a plow in the front of their truck. And, when I see them, they're pushing the snow up along the side of the driveway into the yard. So in our opinion, there's gonna be plenty of room. This isn't the first townhome community that we've built, and we live in Minnesota. Snow removal is a thing. It's as real as garbage disposal and anything else. And our HOAs contract with companies to do it, and there's certain requirements, very specific on inches of snowfall when they come out, number of hours that they're required to respond in. So it's something that's taken very seriously, and it's managed.
It's just,
And I also add that if the city felt a level of comfort with the Victoria Ridge townhome development that was just approved, that's gonna be built off Victoria Drive, north of the Quick Trip and the apartment building. If there was a level of comfort with snow removal in that community, I would think there should be the same level of comfort here.
My own experience, we're in a townhouse development at the same time. And of course, there's been years where there's been very little, if any, snow. And there's been some years where it's been almost unbelievable amount of snow. And these guys with the Bobcats, they seem to find room. I mean, is there room? Well, no, not really, but they, what else are they gonna do? And they do find room. I mean, I think that's pretty congested area, and not a boulevard. How much can you stack up and the cost in doing it on? But average, the winters you're gonna get, I mean, as of recent, you will get, 2 winters out of 10 that's really heavy. So you just say, well, we're not gonna prepare for 10 years of heavy snow and requirements that would be required in my view, I think and hauling away is extremely expensive. But in lieu of that, and I'm on have been on a HOA board for 10-plus years, and, well, let's figure this out in lieu of the cost of hauling it away, so.
I'll put your list back up. What else were we, besides the private street?
And I will say, even if it does have to be hauled, the twin homes would also be included as part of the HOA snow removal. So there's certainly more room on this new plan in that twin home area than there was previously, where there was 4 and 6 unit buildings shown previously.
Well, we have, where we live, there's twin homes on one side, and then there's quads, with a finger street on the other side. And, so it's all one association. So, every square foot of yard is free game for the Bobcat operators, and it seems to work. I mean, you know, from a very practical standpoint, it's a, you know, there's easy solutions is the way it appears.
Commissioners, just for clarification, I want to make sure that there's consensus on 2 points that we've discussed here. It sounds like private street, 26 feet wide to allow parking on one side, and sidewalks on both sides. Do I have that correct, or do you want to does anyone want to change that?
That would be a preference if possible.
Yeah.
Okay, you're in 3. Do I have 4?
Yeah.
I got 7. Awesome. Yep. Thank you. And then the last point that I mentioned was trail on Creekside Lane. If you want to see trail on both sides of Creekside Lane for the entire stretch through the development to get back to our residential collector standard, or if you're comfortable with the trail connection only between the cul-de-sac and the private drive on the north side of Creekside. So I'll bring the map back up to highlight that again. So
Where did we land with the trail coming in on that? Above and the
the Marsh Hollow one?
yeah.
Is that on both sides, or is that on one?
No, yeah, on whatever that
On
street is.
Creekside Lane?
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't we have a big debate about that?
So they've got trail on the south side, the whole stretch.
Yep.
And then sidewalk shown between here. Staff's preference would be a trail, the full stretch, because that's our residential collector road standard. But we are also comfortable with a trail, not a sidewalk, connecting these two, because the city would want to maintain that portion. If we're already going to be out there doing the south side, we might as well be doing the north side as well. The question is, do you want the trail on the north to go the whole stretch of the road, or are you comfortable just connecting these two?
I guess my question back is, what is the trail on the north and south connecting to? Like it on the other side that's already finished, I'm gonna air quote finished, is there trail on both sides?
Over here?
Up in Marsh Hollow.
Yeah, in Marsh Hollow.
There is not. On the north side, here is the 3rd and 4th editions of the Huntersburg Creekside development. They only have crosswalks at their private streets. The reason for that being is because there is a drop-off there that did not
Remember that, yeah.
allow for sufficient grading to get a trail in there. So we provided a deviation for them, or the Planning Commission and City Council did, because of the grading conditions here. Those conditions aren't present in this area, so we go back to the question similar that we did with Creekside. Should we require it for the full stretch, or are you just comfortable connecting the neighborhoods to the crosswalk so that these residents could access the park as well? It's really what comes down.
It should go the full length, because it'll be another trail that ends somewhere and doesn't connect. And we'll be doing a trail connection, like,
I'm not understanding, like, why would we put a trail on the north if it's gonna dead end there anyways, though? It's not connecting to anything. It would just be on that short strip.
I don't know why you do it on again,
From a
direction
staff
turn.
perspective, or maybe even just a resident perspective, so if these residents wanted to go and use the Marsh Hollow Park for reference, they would have to come down this way, cross, then go back
I think
safely.
it should go down along those single-family lots.
Yeah.
And then and then somewhere they're gonna have to cross those townhomes, or they would cross there to go up. It should just be on the, I'm gonna say, left-hand side of the road as I'm looking at it.
The problem with putting it on the left hand is there's no path on the left hand north or east of that. So they're still gonna have to cross.
Right.
So my point is like keep it on the south because there's already a path on the south. Like where they show it makes sense.
And then just have a little connector between these two neighborhoods?
Yeah, similar to what they're showing right now. They'll only change that.
This path goes all the way up here, and then if there's another
There's no
trail later
there's no
on,
path
it
up
would
here.
connect here.
This side there's no path. It's over here.
Yeah.
And so putting one
But
here,
then this path should go all the way down.
that I agree with.
Yeah.
It
You're
should
talking
still,
about
there
this
should
one
be,
on this near side, right?
Yeah,
There's-
that one should go all the way down.
So yeah, the south side of Creekside Lane, or if you're looking at the picture on the right side of Creekside, or the south side, there is trail, city trail, 8-foot wide
all the way
trail
down.
from east to west. On the north side of Creekside, we are showing just a sidewalk connection between the easterly private street and the northerly cul-de-sac.
And I would say that's the right way because again, that's not another neighborhood. It's was that eight or nine homes? I don't know how many.
13.
I mean, that's even, yeah, I mean.
And it sticks with what we did on just east.
It connects the two neighborhoods, or the two
What I'm-
cul-de-sacs.
What I'm hearing is just the trail connection between the two. Is the planning commission comfortable with that?
That would be my
But
recommendation.
what, I mean, just,
Unless you wanted to go but I don't know why you'd even connect it all the way down.
No,
Whether you go up.
my only thought was like, why connect the two neighborhoods on the other side of the road if you have a path going all the way down and if you just cross over, you're on the trail.
You have to cross over. If you wanted to connect the two neighborhoods, that'd be the only thing.
Yeah, but, so you cross the road once and cross again, and you've saved putting in a sidewalk
Or a trail.
or
Yeah.
a trail for,
And maintain
that's
it.
never traveled,
And maintaining it.
and maintaining it.
And just for reference for planning commission, I'll reiterate the same thing to city council. This is our one opportunity at getting a trail along this full stretch. If that's what we envision for our trail corridor in the future, we should request it now. But if you're comfortable with just the trail connection between the two neighborhoods, that's fine as well.
All right, so with that in mind,
Or you could refer it back.
Let me just
to
ask a
Parks
question.
and Rec.
So this trail right here
Yep.
connects, like, to your satisfaction, or no?
The south side, yes,
The south side connects it all, fully.
exactly.
This tiny little piece is inconsequential to the trail system or whatever, right?
That's the portion that I want feedback from the planning commission on, because it's fine, it meets the needs of this community. Will it meet the needs of any potential future resident when Creekside is extended even further down and there's no sidewalk on the north side for them, so they have to cross over as well? That's the question. It's getting to our residential collector standard. Do we want it on both sides or do we not?
It's children crossing over. And therein lies, the reason to really have it on both sides, in my view.
but either way, they're gonna have to cross somewhere.
You're gonna have to cross up at.
Yeah, so it's either at
You're gonna have to-
the edge up here, or here, or down here. Like, no matter what, if they want to get up here, they're gonna have to cross if they live on this north side. If I remember some of these early designs over here, it's very similar to this. It's a couple scattered houses, maybe a dozen at most, that I think we're gonna end up following the same kind of path that we've already figured out here. That's my recommendation, but I think I would leave it on the south and just simplify it.
Okay. Maybe I'll just go around and ask each commissioner what the preference is. I think everyone understands the whole picture here, so Commissioner Arstetter, do you have a preference?
south is fine.
South is fine, okay.
In this case, the south works. It's more like my neighborhood, but I want to see it come from top to bottom.
On the south side.
Yeah.
Both sides having had a lot of exposure to Park and Rec and the trail system. If it's not done today, tomorrow it's too late. So I would opt for both sides.
Chair Kuhn?
I agree with either a portion on both sides. Whether it goes up to Marsh Hollow, but then it should go, whether it continues down to the end of the road. Like John, trying to build these paths after these developments are in, it's like not, don't take my yard, don't do this, don't, you know, I don't want it, and it's just easier to do it up front. And if someday, if you ever want to take it out, you can take it out.
Or
Full length south side,
any preference on the north?
indifferent.
Full length south side, I'm indifferent on the north.
Okay. Recius?
Full length, both sides.
Okay, sounds good. So I've got full length south side, 4 votes, and indifferent on the north side, 3 votes. So I'll provide that feedback to city council and they can make the final.
Well, I agree with full width on the south side. I mean, going
Yeah,
south side all the way.
Yep. The main question
On the
here
north
is
side,
the north side. Do we want it the full way? Or are we just comfortable with the sliver? That was my question.
Gotcha.
And I think I got the vibes of the group. Okay. I'll go back to my last slide. So we can ask
on the
any-
deviations, just like the variance we just discussed, these lots aren't made right, somebody's gonna come along and do something different in their backyard. Do they have enough room in their backyard to do what they wanna do? And that's the problem I have, with some of these twin homes. How big of patios are you putting in the backyard, or access to the twin homes? And we're over impervious surface. That's the question I have on that. I don't know, and I don't have an answer for you.
And as far
except
as,
that
you know, space to do
just-
something
you
in the
heard
rear
the
yard.
discussion we had about earlier today, and that's what we're running into. And I think it's gonna get worse and worse, to be honest.
So in the single families here, again, the deviations on lot depth and impervious, was only on 8 or 9 of the 36 single family. We're gonna be able to maintain the required 30-foot rear yard setback. So at a minimum, you're gonna have 30 feet from the back of your home to your rear lot line. So you'll be able to put in if somebody wants to put in a pool or a patio or a fire pit, they'll have room for that.
They won't be able to.
They won't be able to?
Not a pool, with the impervious,
And the HOA would probably restrict a lot of that anyway.
right.
But there's no, all the wetland buffers are being platted outside of the private lots. So there's not gonna be any buffer setbacks or anything like that.
I guess maybe one recommendation is to like make it very clear which lots, excuse me, are and are not meeting or are not needing deviations. So I think that would paint a better picture for if it truly is a couple that changes the conversation versus what we're seeing here. It makes it seem like most of them are, which is, I don't know, Brian, if that's just the way this is marked up or what, but.
That's probably just the way it's presented here, but
Yeah.
Josh has more technical information on this than I would.
So 2 points quickly on that is, one is, yes, whether we would like to see another sketch. I think that would be a fine point to add that delineation. My question on these numbers was, are those averages of those 38? You know, because going from like 12,000 to 55 It's less than half.
That was, Chair and Commissioners, just to clarify, Josh had sent over some figures late last week after I'd prepared the report. The number for the minimum lot area that he gave me was 5,500 square feet. For clarification, I don't know if that's the twin home lot area that you were talking about. Do you know what the single-family lot size would be off the top of your head?
The smallest one, I think that was, looking at if we had and looking at this now, it should be 5,600, because at first we were thinking 55-foot wide lots. But wanting to go with 8-foot side setbacks instead of 7.5, that made it 56. And my engineer was telling me that one lot, maybe two lots, will be as shallow as 100 feet because of the wetland buffer behind it. Again, that we didn't have to worry about because previously there was townhomes there, which do not have as deep a rear yard. So we have maybe two that are at 100. So if you take 56 times 100, that's 5,600. Most of them are going to be 120 feet deep or more. So I think that's just showing like the most extreme deviation would be 5,600.
Yeah. The impervious was, that's another, I think it's part of the density of this kind of housing. There was,
And just for reference, portions of Hunter's Brook also did receive a 50% impervious, so there's some history there as well in the city.
And perhaps with our preliminary plat application, we could not only show graphically which lots we're talking about, but maybe show a cumulative impervious for all the single-family lots. One lot might be at 50%, but another lot might be at 20. When fully built out with a driveway and we'll assume the largest footprint just to be conservative.
Okay.
yeah, my recommendation is bring another vision back. Yeah, for us to prelim.
If I could just request not, we were previously expecting to be through city council preliminary plat by this point. Our hope was to be grading as soon as road restrictions are off, which could be in a couple of weeks. So to bring this back for another review of a concept after already receiving what I think are pretty thorough comments tonight and good direction, that would cost us at least another 2 weeks. And we have sellers that have already been gracious enough to extend us on our closing dates. And we're trying to do good by them as well to try to get to a end goal as soon as possible.
I would say, you're taking it to council next week. See what their feedback is. Did we get the answers you were looking for?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commissioners.
And we can move, if council is ready to move forward, I would recommend that you can get past them. I think we could probably go on to the preliminary plat.
Well, there is no decision tonight, right?
Correct.
So
Yep, just good.
don't worry about what I said.
Oh, I worry.
Any other? Hearing none. Thank you, Josh. And
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Look forward. That concludes our discussion items for this evening. Moving on to the miscellaneous section of our agenda. Staff.
Yes, few items. Firstly, if you watched the city council meeting last week, the city council did choose 3 new appointments for the planning commission. So unfortunately, tonight is Jarrett and John's last meeting on the planning commission. Just want to thank you both for all your years of service and experience. It's really been great working with the both of you.
Wow.
And then our April 1st meeting, we will introduce the new members, also have our nominations for chair and vice chair. So start thinking about your peers and who would be best serving those roles. And then also adopting our work plan for the year and going through our yearly orientation. So all the housekeeping stuff at the beginning of the planning commission year on April 1st. And then lastly, Jen and Travis have been working hard on an outdoor dining ordinance to replace our Eat Street policy, so they'll be bringing that forward as well.
Question, is anybody else going on spring break? Because I have kids and I'm gone April 1st. No. Okay.
I know one of our new commissioners will not be at the April 1st meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to attend, but if it's not widely missed, I won't be there.
April 1st?
First Tuesday. April Fools. Yeah. So you could play a really good joke and nominate Ben for chair.
Yes, I will be
Light it up.
on vacation that.
Are you also gone? Yeah.
So we'll have 4 members.
Can you move it? That discussion?
We won't have a chair if we move it. We need those nominations to occur for the first meeting because the chair's term is only a year. So we will, at the very minimum, at least have to nominate a chair and vice chair for that meeting.
Nominate and vote, or nominate?
Correct. Nominate and vote.
Can you become chair without being there?
I don't see why not.
Don't worry, you're about to.
Yeah, watch
We're
it.
gonna find out.
Can you, I don't know if you have internet.
You would probably have to accept the nomination. So for best practice, I would say we wouldn't want to nominate anyone who's not present. We're gonna need a chair and vice chair for the year.
Could you do it by Zoom or not?
Cannot.
Cannot, okay.
I might be back on time. I can't remember when I fly in.
Not canceling spring break.
You shouldn't
Gonna be
have
in
to.
Puerto Rico for a wedding. Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any miscellaneous items?
Nope.
No, just
Thanks for your
thanks,
service.
John and Jared. I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to miss all of your great experience and contributions. It's going to be a real loss without you.
It's
Seriously.
been a great honor, and I enjoyed the 6 years. Did a lot, didn't we, John?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a huge amount of
Developments,
of
ordinance.
development that occurred, yeah. And we had 1 year, did we have
A year
any
or-
meetings that were not a public hearing?
Well,
Minimal at best. But I do think it is an incredible opportunity for literally everyone that has an interest in it. And I think the educational value is absolutely incredible. My original statement that I had made 3 years ago was that I had term limited myself. Now, all of that said, I think that the planning commission has a combination, needs a combination of a certain level of history and also a large level of new perspective. So however that's accomplished, it'll be accomplished. So that's good. That's good. But yeah, I had a very enjoyable, and one of the city council members that was on when I was originally selected said, so, and I knew him somewhat, and he said, and, without going into a real long story, but, he said, so what do you know about being on the planning commission? And I said, here's what I do know, is that I have a huge amount to learn. He said, you're in. A lot to learn, so
I will volunteer input if you want to reach out. I'm not going anywhere, so, but thank you. It's been,
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Great job.
we get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We are adjourned.